Hey YouTube, Morfien back with another video. Today we have something a little different for you. Historically we've covered WoW on the channel, but of course it's not the only game in our lives. Today I thought we'd take a second to jump into the world of Genshin Impact. We've got a couple real life friends and family picking up the game for the first time, and since no one else is watching anyways, I thought we might be able to help get them up to speed, starting off with a guide for everybody's favorite Cocogoat, Ganyu. Let's get into it. Alright, to start things off, we're going to go over her skills, talents, and constellations, starting with her skill, Trail of the Quillin, which basically, it's an amped up version of Amber's E. She throws out a flower on the ground that will taunt enemies, and when she throws it out, it will do damage, and then it will do damage again when it explodes. The other thing that it does, and I've been trying to confirm this, but it says it shuns all impurity. And I assume that to mean that it will shed any debuffs that you have on you. So if you're wet and you use her E, you're no longer wet. Next we have her Elemental Burst, which is Celestial Shower. Again, it's a lot like Amber's Burst, except that it has probably 3 times the radius. This thing is huge. It's also phenomenally good. It lasts forever, and you can basically have 100% uptime on it. In the builds that we'll be discussing, particularly the support build, she is mainly about her Celestial Shower. Any of the other builds, more focused on aim shotting, but also a little more costly. Let's just say that. Next, moving on to her talents, we have Undivided Heart, which is after firing Frostflake Arrow, the crit rate of subsequent Frostweight arrows and the resulting blooms effect is increased by 20% for 5 seconds. Pretty good. Basically means chaining aim shots into each other increases the damage of subsequent aim shots. And then lastly, her second Ascension power-up is Celestial Shower grants a 20% cryo damage bonus to all active party members in the AoE. So basically 20% additional damage on her ult and any other cryo damage going on. And then lastly, we'll go over the constellations. Now, here on the channel, we're not exactly a Leviathan or anything of that nature. I guess technically we classify as a regular whale. But first constellation is Dew Drinker, which basically taking damage from a charged level 2, so fully charged Frostflake Arrow, decreases the opponent's cryo resistance by 15% for 6 seconds. Additionally, anytime she fires a fully charged Frostflake Arrow, regardless of hitting its target or not, she will get back 2 energy. Constellation 2 is Trail of the Quillin, gains 1 additional charge, so it starts off with 1. When you get Constellation 2, you will get 2 charges. This is not uncommon for Constellation. Amber has it, Zhao has it, a couple others have it. The other thing that I would say about this one is you can basically get the effect of Trail of the Quill, or this additional charge, through a weapon, but we'll talk about that later when we get to the weapon section. Third constellation is just an upgrade to Celestial Shower or Burst. Fourth constellations are opponents standing within the AoE of Celestial Shower take increased damage, and it ramps up every second for a maximum of 25% damage. Her C4 is actually very good at her C6 is probably the best one, but the C4 is still very, very valuable. C5, Trail of Quillin, gets 3 levels, maximum level is 15. Standard standard C3 and C5 on her. C6 is Trail of the Quillin causes the next Frostflake Arrow within 30 seconds to not require charging. Now this is the real one. This one is amazing. This one makes her almost a completely different character. So if you have C6, you'll also have 2 charges on your Trail of the Quillin. This means that you can start off a fight with a leading aim shot, E, aim shot, E, aim shot again. Instantly kill just about anything in the game. You've seen, I don't have a C6 Ganyu, so I can't show you, but I'm sure if you look around, you can see her one-shotting just about anything in the game, or damn near, through using that sequence. And that's about it for her talents, constellations, and skills. In the next part of the video, we will cover weapons. Alright, so moving on to the weapons section, you can see we have the list of all the bows in the game pulled up, and even some bows that aren't in the game yet, like the Alley Hunter. And as usual, we will skip any 3-star or lower weapons because they are, for most intents and purposes, worthless. Starting with the 4 stars, I think the first one to mention would be the Stringless. And what the Stringless does is it has the effect of increasing your elemental skill and elemental burst damage by 24 to 48% at max refine, which is just downright amazing, especially for a character like Ganyu, support Ganyu in particular, where your goal is to have your ult up as often as possible and doing as much damage as possible. The only downside to the Stringless is that its secondary stat is Elemental Mastery, and typically speaking, on a cryo character, you do not want a ton of Elemental Mastery because they are not the ones triggering the elemental reaction. They are the ones applying the elemental, the cryo element, and then somebody else would be coming in and melting it, for example. And that person, the character melting, causing the melt, you would not mind having Elemental Mastery on, but Ganyu having Elemental Mastery would not provide any benefits in that situation. The next bow to mention would be the Viridescent Hunt, which is the Battle Pass bow, and the effect of the Viridescent Hunt is not particularly useful to Ganyu unless you're doing the aim shot build. But if you're doing the aim shot build, I'm gonna guess that you got the Amos bow or the what's the other one? The Skyward Harp. You probably have one of those in your back pocket as well. Anyways, the advantage of the Viridescent Hunt is basically that its secondary stat is crit rate, which can be incredibly hard to find, so is not worthless when it comes to being just a stat stick, and that's why I thought we'd take a second to talk about the Viridescent Hunt. Now, the third option, and my personal choice, is the Sacrificial Bow. And what the Sacrificial Bow does is when you use your elemental skill, you have a 40 to 80% at max refine chance to reset the cooldown of that elemental skill. So basically you're getting yourself Ganyu C2 every 30 seconds. And it's not particularly noteworthy for having multiple taunts or doing damage or anything like that, but it is noteworthy for generating energy for blasting off your ultimate as often as possible. So for that reason, and additionally having energy recharge as a secondary stat, along with being one of the highest base attack 4-star bows, the Sacrificial Bow, in my opinion, is one of the better options for Ganyu, support Ganyu specifically, among the 4-star weapon options. And then the last option of the 4 stars that I'm gonna, basically it's an honorable mention. I'm not sure how great I think it would be on Ganyu, but I know there's some people out there that don't have a lot of options, and this one is basically one that most players can get access to, and that is the Black Cliff Warbow. And the effect of the Black Cliff Warbow is that after defeating an enemy, you get 12% attack for 30 seconds, and it stacks 3 times. I do not believe the duration of each stack refreshes, so you're not going to be able to keep this buff up forever, but it's still a pretty nice buff while you have it. The other thing to mention is that it has a secondary stat of crit damage, which is extremely nice. And not only that, but it does have the high attack for a 4-star weapon. And then lastly, we'll cover the 4 stars. Now, obviously, or sorry, the 5-star weapons. Now, either of these will be the go-to option if you have them and they're not on somebody else. For obvious reasons, the 5-star weapons are just created a little bit differently than the 4 stars, and you almost can't beat them. But the Skyward Harp, what it does is it increases your attack damage by 20%, and hits have a 60% chance to inflict a small AoE attack, dealing 125% physical attack damage, and it can occur once every 4 seconds. The other reason the Skyward Harp is nice is because it has that secondary crit rate, which again can be very hard to find on your artifacts and get on your characters. And having it as the secondary on the weapon just makes your life so much easier when it comes to picking your artifacts. And then the last weapon that we're going to cover in regards to Ganyu is the Amos bow. And this is the bow that they actually recommended when she came out. Sorry about that. I'm not sure I would have spent money to get the Amos bow on my Ganyu in any situation, unless I was a Mega Whale, and I guess that's what they were going for, because this is more of the physical version bow. So if you're going for the aim shots on Ganyu, you're probably going to lean towards the Amos, because it increases your normal and charged attack damage by 12%. And normal and charge attack damage increases by 8% every 1 second, up to 5 times. It also has a secondary attack percent stat, which is, you can't go wrong having attack, crit rate, or crit damage as your secondary. The only thing you're really looking to avoid in most situations is that elemental mastery, and on most characters, but not all characters, the energy recharge. So that basically wraps it up for the weapons. In the next section, we will be covering artifact sets. Alright, when we're talking about artifacts in regards to Ganyu, there is basically 2 sets that come to mind, in my mind anyways. And the first one is going to be the Blizzard Strayer set. And for any that don't know, what this does is, on the 2-piece it provides a 15% cryo damage bonus, and on the 4-piece it increases the character's critical rate when the opponent is affected by cryo by 20%, and if they are afflicted with frozen, it is increased by an additional 20%. So a maximum potential of 40% crit rate for the 4-piece, as long as opponents are frozen, which might not sound particularly great, but if you have Ganyu's ultimate out and you have a water character on the field consistently freezing, or a water effect on the field consistently freezing the opponent without breaking them, you're getting that 40% crit on your Ganyu, which is actually pretty nice. It increases the damage of her ultimate by a ton. It also makes it so you can use your allocate your stats in a different direction other than crit. And if you've played this game for any amount of time, you will know that crit is very hard to come by, an extremely sought after stat. So if you have artifacts that are very, very good but lacking crit, you might be able to use them on your Ganyu. So that's the first set I recommend. For any kind of like reactionary burst support DPS, I think this one's probably the winner. But not everybody has access to good artifacts of every set, so we always like to bring a second option, and in my opinion that second option for Ganyu would be the Noblesse Oblige set. For those unfamiliar, what that does on 2 pieces, it increases your elemental burst damage by 20%. Again, Ganyu's ultimate does a lot of damage, so having another 20% on top of that, pretty nice. And then the 4-piece, after using an elemental burst, increases all party members' attack damage by 20% for 12 seconds. So you put Ganyu on the field, you pop your ult, does a bunch of damage, and it increases everybody else's attack by 20%. You swap to somebody else, start doing the damage. So basically that would be my second option as far as complete sets on Ganyu. Now, there's always the options of mix and matching, so doing like, you know, 2-piece Noblesse, 2-piece Blizzard. Alright, and lastly, we'll go over the individual artifacts themselves, and we'll use my Ganyu as an example, but I will also talk about what you might want on your Ganyu hypothetically, because everybody's artifacts will be different and nobody's will be perfect. I mean, unless you're that guy. But starting off with the flowers, basically on the flower you are always going to have flat health as the main stat. There's nothing you can do about that. So you can only look at the subs and hope for good subs. Now, because you have a flat main stats and there's no roll of the main stats, I typically am looking for three or four desirable substats. And the desirable substats in my mind are crit rate, crit damage, attack, element energy recharge, and lastly elemental mastery. If it's not one of those, I kind of don't want to see it on my artifact, right? Now there are some situations where like you'll have an extremely well rolled artifact and it has like a flat defense on there, and you manage to dodge the flat defense when rolling it. Perfect. It's still a very good artifact. Go ahead and use it. But when it comes to the flowers, like I said, I'm looking for 3 to 4 of those desirable stats, ideally 4. And if it doesn't have those, maybe we're looking at a different artifact. But anyways, for Ganyu, we're looking for crit, attack, crit damage, and energy recharge. Again, we're not really looking for that elemental mastery, so the 16 elemental mastery here, not their most desirable, but you know, we only got one roll into that, and the majority of this artifact rolled into attack and energy recharge, which are both extremely desirable stats for Ganyu. Moving on to the Plume of Death, or the feather. Same thing here, you can only roll flat attack as the main stat on these. And as such, you're probably looking for 3 to 4 desirable stats in the subs. On our Ganyu, we've got that elemental mastery, which we're not huge fans of, but it only has one roll into it, so we're all right with it. And then again, on this particular feather, we have a fat attack roll. I don't know why I had such luck getting attack rolls on these two pieces, but as a result, they're pretty good looking. You know, the only downside on this feather in particular is that roll into the HP, but at least it's percent and not flat. Alright, next we're getting into the sands. Now the sands, we have a little bit more to talk about because you do have a main stat roll to worry about here. And the main thing you're looking for on your sands, because it has a particular, like, it has only so many options it can roll as a main stat. Primarily we are looking for attack, but on some characters you might be looking for elemental mastery or energy recharge. In the case of Ganyu, you're pretty much always going to want attack, and you're going to want, you know, crit damage, crit rate subs, and maybe energy recharge if you can find it. As for goblets, it's fairly well known at this point that goblets can roll the elemental damage modifiers on the main stat, and they're pretty much the only slot that can, and for that reason you will almost always want to have your main stat on your goblet be your elemental damage. It will also frequently end up being your off piece, because getting the elemental damages on the goblets can be very hard. But again, you're looking for, so if you have your elemental damage as your main stat, you're looking for attack, crit rate, crit damage subs. And as you can see on this one, we have all of them, even the flat attack. It's a pretty good artifact. And then lastly, go into circlets. Now circlets are a little bit different. You have a couple options here, but the big ones are crit rate and crit damage. You'll pretty much want this on every character in the game. Now, I keep waiting for them to add like more defense or HP based characters. You know, we finally got a little bit of that with Alfredo and Zhongli. But I'd like to see some more, and I'd like to see it not related to constellations. I think adding interesting scaling through constellations is a bad move on their part, but that's a topic for another video. Anyways, crit rate, crit damage, that's what you're mainly looking for. Alternatively, you can get attack damage or healing bonus depending on the character as a main stat on your circlets. But as a result, you're looking for attack in your subs if you can get it, energy recharge, and then you're looking for the opposite of whatever the main stat is. So if you have a crit rate main stat, you can't roll crit rate in the subs, obviously. So you ideally you want crit damage in the subs, and vice versa. On the crit damage main, you want the crit rate on the sub. So as you can see here, we've got 62% crit damage main and 11.7% crit rate in the subs. It's hard to find artifacts like that, but I wish I had 17 of them. So that basically covers the artifact section of the video. Lastly, I think we'll just take Ganyu out into the world and we'll kill some shit real quick. So while I'm rolling the combat clips, I wanted to just take a second and talk about the two different ways to build Ganyu, and that is basically you can run her as an aim shot FPS style character. My only argument against using her in this play style is that I feel to really capture the power of the aim shot build, you do need to have a couple of her constellations. I'm not going to say the C6 is required, but God, it makes it so much more attractive. And for that reason, I chose to build my... Well, I mean, that reason and a couple other reasons. I chose to build my Ganyu as a more supported unit. I like that it allows me to more easily squeeze her into basically any team comp, and doesn't pigeonhole her into having to be out and in that aim mode attempting to shoot arrows and, well, if you're me, missing. So anyways, I just want to pop in real quick and talk about why I chose to build my Ganyu support instead of the aim shot build that you may see in other videos.
Adventure time! Adventure time! Yeah. Everybody stand! Odds reveal fight! All hail!
Retribution!
Teamwork is dreamwork! Let's light it! Odds reveal! Access denied! We're way behind schedule.
Well, Ganyu, the Cocogoat, as you can see, she's pretty damn good, and I love that you can build her a couple different ways. But that's my time. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Questions, comments, or concerns, as always, leave them down below. And don't forget to check me out on Twitch. Have a good one. We'll see you.